Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media.
Welcome home, everybody. You are tuned into this week's MiniPod. I am Tiffany Cross, of course, here with Angela Rye and Andrew Gillum. Welcome home, everybody.
Welcome home.
All right, so I really wanted us to talk about what is happening in Tulsa, Oklahoma this week. You guys remember a few years ago, everybody was paying attention to Tulsa, Oklahoma because it was the 100-year anniversary in 2021 of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And so, it shows out like Lovecraft Country and Watchmen, and everyone was focused on this. And unfortunately, after that centennial went away, so too did a lot of the attention. However, what happened in Tulsa is still very much active. Let me first take you back in history to 1921. There was a young man by the name of Dick Rowland who was an elevator operator in the white part of the community. He was on an elevator when a white woman, Sarah Page, got on this elevator with him. Sarah Page alleged, as so many people did at that time when it came to young black men, Sarah Page alleged that Dick Rowland had acted improperly with her. And news spread throughout this white town, with each telling being more exaggerated. There's doubt that anything even happened on this elevator. However, when the white people heard about this, they had already felt a way about the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, which housed Black businesses, Black professionals. I believe the dollar passed through the neighborhood over 30 times before leaving the community. This was a self-sufficient Black community of what W.E.B. Du Bois would call the talented 10th. When news spread, a white violent mob attacked the Greenwood district, destroying over 1,200 homes, innumerable Black businesses. We don't know if this could have been the next Hilton, so to speak, Black-owned Hilton. There were Black doctors' practices there, and they attacked, killing hundreds of people. The exact number to this date is still not known. Because they have not excavated all the bodies. There is alleged participation from state elected officials. So this is very much state-sanctioned violence. Now, they were back in court this week before the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and I'm going to kick it to you, Angela, to tell us why they were in court.
Yes, and before we do that, there was a moment in court by one of the justices that I think we should hear less about what is happening and why they were there, but the impact of them being there.
When I went to high school, I knew about the Trail of Tears. I knew why Chief Pleasant Porter wanted prohibition in the Constitution, but Greenwood was never mentioned. And so I think regardless of what happens, that you're all to be commended for making sure that that will never happen again, that it will be in the history books.
Thank you, Justice Carter. I would just like to say two other things real quickly. One, as we pledged in our petition, over a third of the homes and businesses destroyed during the massacre were never rebuilt, and many of those people were never heard from again. 8,000 people were made homeless overnight. And I want to say one last thing. 117 years ago, the founders of the great state of Oklahoma wrote these powerful words in the Constitution in Article 2, Section 6. Quote, "The courts of justice of this state shall be open to every person, and speedy and certain remedy afforded for every wrong and for every injury to person, property, or reputation. And right and justice shall be administered without sale, denial, delay, or prejudice." Yet these plaintiffs have been waiting for almost 103 years for their opportunity to be in court to prove what happened to them and their community. We're just simply asking that this court give us the opportunity to be remanded back to the district court to prove our claims. And if we have an opportunity at another time to discuss it after the trial, we look forward to that. Thank you.
Shout out to our brother Damario Solomon-Simmons, who has been a champion of this truly since we were in law school. I was on in the National Black Law Students Association with him, and this has been his battle. Reparations has been Damario's battle. He is one of the people who helped to educate me about the fact that reparations is not just about what is owed to Black people from slavery, but it is what is owed to Black people at every single decade since. And this is a case in point. If Greenwood, the financial district where this happened in Tulsa, was the only place that it took place, that would be one thing, but it's happened in multiple other states in multiple other time periods. White mobs destruction because of, Project 2025 like goals. There's always people who seek to steal, kill, and destroy. With this particular suit, all the attorneys were asking was for this case to actually have its just day in court. They appealed to the Supreme Court after the case was dismissed at the district court level. And the point is, they're arguing that the statute of limitations has not run on this, despite it being 100 plus years old. The fact that it was a public nuisance that took place and has impacted people on a multi-generational level, this should mean that they have their opportunity to pursue justice against the city of Tulsa and the state of Oklahoma. Of course, there's been broad pushback on this. I had the opportunity to be in Tulsa, actually with you, Tiff. During the centennial, I did a special with Tidal where I got to interview the 3 remaining survivors at that point. Of course, now we've lost Uncle Red. And I think the real issue here is how much longer? Are they waiting for these folks to die out? Which it seems like is in fact the case, as one survivor after another is no longer with us. You just wonder if they're not here, then there really isn't standing for the case. They were adversely impacted by what happened in Tulsa personally. Some of them had to flee their homes personally. So you wonder what all is at stake. So I appreciate the justice who talked about learning about the Trail of Tears, but not learning about this. I was stunned by the number of people in Tulsa who had not heard the story of Greenwood, even folks who are descendants of survivors.
And I just want to say Mother Fletcher is 109. Mother Randall is 111. Uncle Red, who Angela referenced, was Mother Fletcher's younger brother. We lost him at 101 years old. And if you ever met Uncle Red, honey, 101 where? Because he liked the party. He loved Roland Martin. He used to always shout him out, but he was just a fun guy. And their descendants have been impacted. And even in Tulsa today, on the north side of Tulsa, where the Greenwood district is housed, you can still see the economic impact. And you literally work alongside the descendants of people who our families are suspected of participating in that. I was down there for a special as well with MSNBC at the time, and I was able to interview the mayor, Mayor G.T. Bynum, and his family. The Black Wall Street Times uncovered that his family had enslaved nearly, I believe, 80 people. And he is somebody who is staunchly against reparations. The audacity, the caucasity of it all is mind-baffling. And I just want to say to your point, Angela, Tulsa was not an anomaly. It was the norm at the time. You can look at the Red Summer of 1919 and in city, I wrote about this extensively in my book, in city after city after city, from Indiana to Charleston, South Carolina, to Cleveland, Ohio, to Gary, Indiana, and cities everywhere at that time were under attack, constant attack of violent white mobs. And I've talked about this before. This is how law enforcement swole their ranks, because they said there was so much violence against Black people. They said, hey, if you guys are going to beat and murder Black folks, you can do it, but you got to wear a badge while you do it. So there's a long history in this country when it comes to racial violence. And people love to quote Chicago and talk about how Chicago can't govern themselves. It started, the original destruction of Chicago was by a mob of violent white people, and it was followed by decades of unfair policies ever since.
All right, y'all, we're going to take a quick break, but before we do, we all know it's important for our community to stay informed, particularly in an election year. So tell someone you know to tell someone you know to make sure that they are listening to Native Land Pod every week, including our MiniPods. We look forward to hearing from you. More after the break.
Man, I envy you too on having had the experience of sitting down with these survivors. And, it is still remarkable to me when I hear of folks who have lived beyond the age of 100. But you almost think at these ages that these women are here almost to see it through.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
Take your turn, Andrew.
And your friend, colleague, the lawyer, and I can't...
Damario. Please follow Damario. Attorney Damario.
That you mentioned.
Civil rights leader.
The fact that he reached back to the Constitution of their state And I really, I'm big on words, the written word, particularly those that are written, more historically, because there's so much power in them, right? When they are fully executed, that every person ought to have access to this court means something to me. It means something to us.
Yeah.
And the fact that the lower court wants to summarily dismiss this, not on its merit, not on the merit. They're not trying to deny what happened, but rather they're finding technical reasons of the law standing, even being partially,
Statute of limitations.
An issue here. Statute of limitations, of which Damario points out in his oral arguments before the court, in that state, in its constitution, in its effectuating statutes, don't have a limitation of statutes when it comes to issues of blight. So you can directly correlate the blight in that community, when that community began to experience blight, was after this massacre, and every point since then, the quality of life goes down. And prior to it, this was the Black Wall Street. The point of the point of departure is extremely clear. At what point decline and blight, the issues upon which they are seeking a legal reprieve, began. You know the exact moment that this happened. Unfortunately, in the case of the massacre that took place there in Oklahoma in the Greenwood district. So the court doesn't have, I think it realizes that if it has to hear the fullness of this argument on its merits, that there is no way that they can, as constitutional officers of that state, turn a blind eye to what occurred. It is well documented. It is well recorded. We know what happened. We know what went down, right? And so, Angela, Tiff, I think they can't go there because they're terrified of what this may signal. What does it signal if our communities, Rosewood,
Yes.
and Florida, and elsewhere around the country, Chicago, what might it signal?
Yeah.
If we then open up a legal doorway for the communities who have been, who were surviving and in some cases thriving prior to the point at which white mobs turned against them, burned them down, and massacred its residents, if they actually have to go back and make that wrong right. There's no way to ever make it right? There's no real justice that can be gained in this case, because most of its survivors have gone on to glory. They're waiting for these final two so that they will have no individual left standing who will have literal standing in the court for the case to be heard. They don't want to open that door, y'all, because if they open it, that door then looks like it can be opened all across the country. I hate it for these two women. I hate it for their descendants. Yeah. But mostly, y'all, I hate it for us, because I think they are foreclosing a legal pathway because they don't want to have to reckon with the history here and what that history has wrought.
And that's the thing to me, too. Like, we have to be able to examine the many ways in which we've been harmed since our arrival. I'm looking at the many race riots that they call race riots, we call race massacres, that have occurred since the late 19th century. Detroit was hit 3 times, 1863, 1943, 1967, Memphis, 1866, Atlanta, 1906, East St. Louis, 1917. Tiff already talked about Red Summer 1919, Arkansas, Maryland, New York, D.C., 2 places in Maryland, Annapolis and Baltimore, New Orleans, Chicago, and there were more, at least 25, right? Corbin, Kentucky, Rosewood, you just mentioned, all of these places, and we have never been made whole from those situations, those violent attacks that cause death and mass destruction in our communities. We've been forced to rebuild.
Economic loss.
Yeah, of course. We've been forced to rebuild from being stripped from our original home. We've been forced to rebuild after being sharecroppers. We've been forced to rebuild after being redlined out of entire neighborhoods and racially restrictive covenants. And then once we were able to survive, they burned our shit down to the ground. But we don't deserve. But we didn't earn it? What are you talking about? That's what's maddening to me, Tip, just this last point. What's maddening to me and why I wanted to talk about this, to throw this in y'all's faces to every conservative outlet that tried to make us look dumb when we addressed reparations last time, and the fact that we probably do deserve a tax credit. That's the least this country owes us, is a tax credit and an apology. Are you kidding me? This isn't about like some harebrained scheme that we've come up with and we're ignorant Negroes who don't know what we're talking about. That's not it. It actually is well researched, well documented, full of data. The economic harm, the social harm, the mental harm, the psychological harm, the ancestral trauma that exists is well documented. Give us what you owe. Period.
That's right.
Period.
I actually never read. I saw the headlines in the conservative media. I never read it because they're so ridiculous. It just didn't seem relevant. But yes, that we caused quite a stir when we were talking about that. But I think I take your point, Andrew, about it being precedent setting legally. And when I was writing my book, I spent 5 months alone just on research for the summer of 1919. Of course, we looked at other acts of violent white aggression as well. But the emotional toll of just reading about this and taking it in. One particular case of Elaine, Arkansas, I won't tell the story here, but the story of Elaine, Arkansas is bone chilling when you hear about how women and children were murdered just for trying to organize. So I want to bring this full circle because we are, this summer will be the anniversary of Augustine. A lot of people know about Juneteenth, but Augustine was the day that the folks aboard the Harriet in Louisiana band together and defended the captain of that boat. And so we have dubbed it Augustine. This would be the 1 year since that happened. This was the original. Dick Rowland was a child, and the men in that community said, nah, Slim, not today. We are going to stand on the front lines, and we are going to defend our families, our women, our children, our homes with everything we have. And there is something beautiful about a community that we belong to coming together, locking arms, saying, I wish you would. They did. They paid with their lives, and many paid with their livelihoods. It's not fair, but just seeing how tight-knit of a community we are, we don't have the privilege to dislike each other. Even if we kind of dislike each other, we don't have the privilege when we get out here in the world. I got to fight for you. You got to fight for me. And that's just the way it is. And there's something beautiful, I think, about that.
I agree with that. And I also, I wish people would for a moment contemplate, what if the founders of Walmart had their stuff leveled,
right,
stomped out, taken from the Coors Light, Anheuser-Busch.
Yep.
Though, so just similarly, who knows what could have been birthed there? All these businesses that we know as Fortune 100 and 500 corporations, real bootstrap, American industrial stories that we hear, that we know about, that has created not just a couple millionaires, but the founders' children, the founders' children's children, the founders' children's children's children, legacies, centuries of wealth that started on a storefront. So which storefront in Oklahoma, in the Greenwood district, which storefront got burned that terrible night that could have been part of the 100, of the top 50 corporations in America? So just consider, when you're thinking about folks begging and getting something they don't deserve, the fact that we just don't know what could have happened. We know what was happening. We know what got snuffed out, but we don't know what potential got killed, not just there, but all over this country where we've seen these recorded events. And those recorded events had the benefit of stymieing anybody else from dreaming and thinking about what we could have accomplished, because that same fate could have awaited them. So I just miss me with all of the jokes and the unearned and undeserved and all that kind of stuff that folks like to throw on these kinds of conversations.
Yeah,
because you don't know, because you ain't never had your life disrupted in quite that way.
Yeah.
Your businesses are on that top 100, 500, 1,000 list.
Exactly. I think we're about to turn this mini pod into a full pod. So I think but I think y'all made such great points, and I just want to close on a quick CTA, and that's please follow Damario Solomon-Simmons. He's at Attorney Damario and everything. This brother is a modern day civil rights hero who has devoted his life to this cause and many other causes. This is his most promising one, or most prevalent one, I should say. But he's on the front lines of a lot of other legal battles, including the freedmen in Oklahoma who are denied citizenship by some of the indigenous communities there. He's worth a follow. He's an inspiration. Damario, we love you. You are never standing alone in this fight. Me, Angela, and Andrew send our love to you. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in to our mini pod. We so appreciate you tuning in. So please be sure to rate and review the show. And don't forget, full episodes of Native Land Pod drop every Thursday. Please tune in wherever you get your podcast.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.